I was expecting my sponsor to be like, hey, man, just, think about it. Don't make any rash decisions. Don't drink. And, like, he didn't say anything like that. The only thing he said was, what about God? Where does God factor into this? You didn't mention one thing about God. And it took me back. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I was not expecting that. And, like, it's a good point, I was like, oh, damn.
That's a good sponsor right there.
Don't Hide the Scars, a weekly podcast focused on addiction and recovery. Created by the nonprofit PAIN, Parents and Addicts in Need, and founded by Flindt Andersen.
Julian, thanks for joining, founder of Parents and Addicts in Need, Flindt Andersen, and myself, Jason, on the Don't Hide the Scars podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey,
of course.
We're glad you're here. We're glad
I'm very glad
We've wanted
I'm
to
here.
do this for a long time.
Yeah.
Us addicts, we love to hang out with other addicts.
Yeah, we do.
Of course.
It's weird in the using and in the recovery, but this one keeps us alive and doing good things for society. It was funny, before you got in here, I said, what have you been up to, Julian? Working? I go, me too. Something about working a job that keeps you out of trouble.
Yeah, man.
It's kept me out of trouble for a long time.
Yeah, I need to stay busy. For me, like, if I don't have anything to do, I'm running amok out there doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I need that structure to keep me engaged in life.
Yeah, and when did you realize that was important?
Well, I've been working since I was probably like 15, so I've always kind of had a job, but before it was definitely a means of getting what I wanted. And, I realized pretty early, like, if I have a job, it's time that I'm not doing bad things, you know? And, like, even when I was using, like, there's just a time for me to focus on what I was doing instead of going out and being worse than I already was, But it was a solid thing in my recovery. I've been busy the entirety of my recovery. I mean, I remember I used to listen to this podcast in rehab.
Right.
And so it's kind of tripping me out to be on the podcast now. But as I was in treatment for about 11 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
I almost did the whole year. All right, I did do the whole, like, right before my year, I stopped going, but for me it was like the first 3 or 4 months, all I did was just recovery. I was in PHP as soon as I got out of rehab.
Right.
I went to a meeting I think it was 2 hours after I got out of rehab. Right. I was in a meeting. I went to 10 meetings a week the first 3 months, and went to IOP 6 hours a day, and still hit the 10 meetings. So for me, it was just I knew I wasn't going to stay sober if I didn't keep myself busy, and even more than that, I knew I would just sit in my head, and I couldn't handle doing that without substances.
Right.
Like I didn't want to be in my head. That's the reason I use substances. So, I was told treat your recovery like your addiction. So I put my all into my recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
And I put as much time as I did into my addiction into my recovery, and it worked out.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hey, Flindt, he brought up a couple things, PHP and IOP. We haven't talked about those. Can you let people maybe that don't know when they hear these terms what exactly those are?
Sure. PHP is, I've never really understood the term.
It's partial
hospitalization program. And again, I know it has some meaning, but basically what it is that the client comes into an outpatient setting for 5 days a week. I think it's 6 hours a day.
6 hours, usually about 9 to 3.
Right. And then they can stay in that. It could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I think, again, if you depending on insurance, what the insurance is going to cover. And then they drop down to IOP. It's a step-down process. So that's intensive outpatient. And that is, that's what, 3 days a week, 3 hours a day?
Well, different programs do it differently. There's IOP 5, which is 3 hours a day, 5 days a week still. And then there's IOP 3, which is 3 days a week for 3 hours. And then you go down to OP, which is just outpatient. Right. That's usually about 2 days a week, and it's an hour and a half.
Right.
Just one group.
Right. And again, they can stay, as long as they want. Especially if they're paying a cash price.
Right.
And our recommendation is always to try to stay as long as one can. That. It's just important to have that ongoing head help, for the lack of a better term, because we don't want them having. Well, they're going to have triggers, but we want to know how they're going to deal with them, and that's what they're taught. And they're taught a bunch of things, but it's just important. In fact, I was talking to Pam prior to coming in, and that's the thing that I didn't do, even in my last treatment center at Betty Ford, and I should have done it. I should have done it, but my circumstance was a little different. I had to, I was at Betty Ford, which is down south. I had to get back home. I had to go back to work. I had a family to support. So I did those things when I got here, but I should have stayed down there. If I had to do it all over again, I would have.
Yeah, I mean, I was blessed. Both my parents work, and I was 18 when I went into rehab, so I dropped out of school, and I just didn't have any responsibilities. I left my job, left school, and for the first 6 months, all I did was focus on recovery, and really it was like, my mom being in recovery as well, she really pushed me to do that, and I stayed in sober living for 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
So she told me while I was still in rehab, like on the phone, she would tell me, like, when you get out, your sole purpose is to focus on recovery. Like,
right.
If you don't do that, I'm not helping you at all. Like, I'll help you if you're focusing 100% on recovery. I'll pay for your sober living. Our insurance is going to cover the treatment, and if there's a copay, we'll pay it. But as soon as you put recovery on the back burner, you're done.
Right.
You're going to be homeless, out of treatment.
Right. You're
not coming back to our house until you get your shit figured out by yourself.
And I just wish more parents would do that. I really do. And I know that it's hard to force somebody, into doing that. But I give so much credit to his parents.
Yeah.
Because that is just key in one's recovery, especially if you're living in their house.
Yeah, and I was.
Right. Yeah. You were. Yeah. You were eating their food.
And I was.
You were using their electricity. All of it. Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, my mom had a lot of trouble. My dad, he wanted to kick me out at 15 when he caught me the first time. He wanted to beat me up and kick me out. But my mom was. She thinks she enabled me, but really I don't think she did, because every time she caught me using, she would say either you go to meetings, like I'm going to drug test you, you're going to go to meetings, or you're going to treatment,
right.
And so that's what I did for a few months. Well, I would do it for about 2 weeks, and then I'd relapse and figure out a way to hide it, but
sure.
She thought I was sober, and so even though I was still using, she didn't know,
right.
and I hate that she blames herself for that, because there's no way that she could have known. And finally, I think, because she did put me in treatment before, she tried to help me get sober since I was 15. Took me to my first meeting for myself at 14. I've been going to meetings since I was a little kid with her, because for herself. And but yeah, I think that she wanted to force me into it, but she knew she couldn't. And so I think this last time that I went in treatment, it was by choice. And she told me, you're 18 now. That's it, I'm proud of you for making this decision, but now that you're 18, if you fail this time, you're done.
But I think, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think what she did at minimum was plant the seed.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm 19 and I've been going to meetings for 20 years. My mom took me in when I was still in her stomach, I've been going to meetings my entire life, and it definitely planted the seed, and
sure.
It just took time for it to sprout.
And that's what we talk about a lot of times around here, is because people say, well, you can't force somebody into treatment. And no, you really can't, but you can put a pretty big dent in it, right? And as long as you are planting that seed with your kid, I think that's important. I really do. I'm surprised when parents don't do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's an interesting thing. You brought up, Julian, I come from addiction, but I was never in the meetings. My sponsor was in the meetings with his mom, same kind of story, and still fell into it. And I think that helps maybe people understand the power of addiction, and yet how much we know about it, and yet at the same time so little.
Right.
It's crazy. I saw all the messed up shit my dad did. I saw it all, and yet somehow I still repeated everything.
Yeah.
It's that subconscious something or other that is going on.
Yeah, I think it's just a genetic thing. Like it's proven that it's a genetic difference in our minds that we are addicted to things, substances that change the way we think. And I think really what it is just like, I never saw my parents in their addiction, but I had a lot of alcoholic uncles, and I think it was just inherent, like I had gone to meetings, I didn't know what they were. By the time I started drinking, I was 10, so I didn't really think like, oh, my uncle's an alcoholic, he's hitting my aunt. Like, I didn't think of that. I was just like, I saw them all drink at parties, and I thought, okay, that's what a man does. He drinks a beer and, shoots the shit with other guys. And even though, like, I hardly ever saw my dad drink, it was still a big thing that I saw in my culture, just that a lot of people drank. And I thought, like, my parents were just kind of different. And I really got into using and drinking more because I was insecure as a kid, and I wanted to fit in, like I thought I would be one of the cool kids if I drank with them, if I smoked weed with them. And after the first time I did it, that was really the reason. And I remember the first time I drank, I was 10, and I drank a beer off of a Corona off of a table that my uncle was drinking. And I remember it tasted disgusting, and like I was like, bro, what the like? Why does anyone do this? Like, it's gross. And I didn't understand it. But a couple of months later, one of my friends brought a water bottle full of vodka to school, and I was like, well, I guess I'll try it again because I want to fit in. And I did, and that was the first time like I felt the effects. Yeah. And I'll never forget that day. I was like, wow, like I want all of it. I want as much possible as I can ever get.
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top-quality care with programs for detox, inpatient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living, support groups, and more. With 50-plus years of combined experience and sobriety, Flindt Andersen and Thelma Gatlin Wilson provide adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, and a safe, comfortable environment. To begin the process of recovery, to proudly create and sustain a life without addiction, call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
And that's what I've talked about over the years. Some of us are just almost predestined, right, for addiction, because we take that drink. Even the first time that I got drunk, and I remember exactly where it was, and I'm throwing up, and as I'm throwing up, I'm going, wow, this is great. Yeah. I'm having a good time here.
Was that when you were the bat boy?
That was one of them.
Oh, okay.
That was one of them when I worked for the Fresno Giants when I was a kid. I just got absolutely pie-eyed, okay, while I was working there with a bunch of 20-year-old baseball players. Yeah, Fresno Giants.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but seriously, I mean, that whole predestined thing that we've talked about for so many years, it's not a lie. There are some of us that just like the feeling, and the minute that alcohol hits, or that pill hits, or that joint hits us, it's like, this is it. I've heard kids say, I've seen God.
Yeah,
that's how I felt. It felt like everything, like, even ever since I was a little kid, I knew there was something wrong with me. I knew, like, how they talk about in AA, you have a God-sized hole, and you're trying to fill it with all these exterior things. I felt that. I knew I had that when I was a little kid. I knew there was something missing. And the first time I got drunk, it felt that I felt whole for the first time in my life.
Wow. Yeah,
and I was chasing that. And then, I mean, even the first time I smoked weed, same thing. Like, first time I vaped, I just wanted to fit in. And, like, the first time I smoked weed, I didn't even get high. Second time I got really high, and then I was like, oh shit, I get it. And like then I wanted it every day. Same thing with benzos, with opiates. Like, everything I touch, I wanted more of it immediately. As soon as I got that high, if I didn't get high, then I was like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm just smoking to smoke. Like, there's no point. I'm not getting high. But as soon as I felt the high from it, I wanted it.
Yeah, and you want more.
And I want all of it.
You bet.
Yeah, it's an oddity for me, because I've talked about it as, I think it was when I got my vasectomy, and they gave me Vicodin, and I took one with beer, and I had been drunk before, and people had passed out pills not knowing what it was, but nothing in that. And I have that weird brain that I was like, I didn't like it. I didn't like cocaine. I was like, I'm already paranoid as is. Why the do I want this shit?
Right.
You know? But there was something for my brain about alcohol that was totally different. I don't know how. I'm still amazed at the other stuff. It was like, no,
take it or leave it.
Yeah, and I can't, it's that oddity. I mean, thank God, but yeah, it was just a weird thing when it started becoming like, wow, I can be social with this. It's acceptable.
It's
and
legal.
You're the good time guy and all these things that for me, I realized, much like you, there was a hole missing, and I didn't realize that until later on either. I mean, you're beyond wisdom at your age compared to where I was at, And once I kind of started to be like, wow, I'm hanging out with popular people, and I started working in radio, and people want to talk to me, and women are coming up to me. It's not the other way around. It's like, oh, subconsciously, here was a solution.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like alcohol is one of the hardest things, like one of the hardest substances to stop using, because, like, in my opinion, opiates, some of the opiates are much stronger, but it's so accessible. It's like, for me, it was easy to get away from the drugs. All I had to do was block all the contacts I had, not go to certain places, and I'm done. You can't go to one fucking grocery store without seeing liquor,
Yeah.
And by the way, stores, whether you knew this or not, liquor stores, grocery stores, they are all designed. It's called a schematic.
Yeah.
They're all designed on how to unconsciously, they've got the alcohol in certain locations in the stores, so you're going to pass it.
Yeah.
You're going to pass it at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, it's just there. It's in front of us.
I've never once gone to a grocery store and not passed alcohol.
Right.
Yeah. It's on the way to the frozen pizza and ice
cream. Yeah, right.
Exactly. Or right across from the produce section.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it's just staring you right in the face.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, thank God for me, I'm not 21, so I haven't been able to drink legally ever, but
So that brings up something a little interesting. All right, so you're 21. When do you turn 21?
About a year and a half.
Okay, I'm just curious. You're gonna have that curiosity of being able to go into a bar and walk in there and
I think
sitting down and
I don't know. That's something I've definitely thought about quite a bit. When I got sober, that was one of the things I was thinking, like, I'll stay sober until I'm 21, then I'll go back, Yeah. And now, as I've become more involved in recovery and, like, actually enjoyed my recovery, like, I don't want to go back, but I still have a fear of, like, okay, when I hit 21, like, what's going to happen? Because it's one thing for me, like, I've had a fake ID before. I've done bottle runs. I'm able to, like, I get alcohol when I want it.
Sure.
But it's a whole different thing when it's like I don't have to go out of my way other than put it in a cart.
Right.
While I'm already buying groceries,
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like that changes it for me quite a bit, because a big part of my early recovery was just staying away. I didn't go to skate parks anymore. I didn't go to the places I knew my dealers hung out. I got a new phone, so I had no contacts, and I really tried to just go to outpatient, go to meetings, stay a sober living. I tried to not do anything else, because I knew if I bumped into someone that had drugs on them, like, I would probably do it.
Right.
So now, I've been around people using, I've been around people drinking, and it hasn't really affected me much, But I also didn't do it the first probably 7 months that I was sober. But the last few months, like, I went to a Halloween party and everyone was drinking, and I saw people I used to use with and I used to sell to, and they offered me drinks. I'm like, oh, no, dude, I'm good. Like, I got to drive home.
Right.
And so, like, I sometimes I still feel uncomfortable saying to certain people, like, that I'm sober, because, I used to do a lot of things with these people where now being sober would be kind of weird to say, like, yeah, I did that with you, less than a year ago, but now I'm sober. And, and some of it's like a lot of people in that area, like, I mean, I remember before I knew deep down I was an addict, but I didn't want to admit it. And so anyone else who would admit they were an addict, I looked down on them. And I made it clear that I looked down on them. And so I think a lot of people are still stuck in that thinking that, like, they don't want to accept that they have a problem. So anyone who accepts that they have a problem is weak, you know?
Right.
And so I think it's just something, like, for me, I need to work on with my ego. And, like, if I'm more connected to God, then I don't really care what people are going to think of me, whether they think I'm weak or not,
Absolutely.
And it's really that's the spiritual malady is my condition, like, it's not the substances, it's my lack of power, and that power I get from God. And as long as I'm in conscious contact with that, I'm not going to care what other people think.
Absolutely.
What do you do to keep in conscious contact?
Well, I pray and meditate every morning and every night. I kind of did the steps out of order. I just finished my 4th step a couple weeks ago. I did it twice because it got stolen the first time. My backpack we were in Italy with my parents, and our rental car got broken into, and I had my 4th step in my backpack, and they took my backpack.
So nobody was looking for your 4th step?
No, so no one was looking for it. No.
It's like, some guy, Giuseppe, you're like, what is he? The guy, he's writing all these apologies.
Yeah. So it was, they probably just threw it in a dumpster or something, but... Yeah, so I did it the second time. I finished it, and I was supposed to get back from Italy and do a 5th step with my sponsor, but it got stolen, and so I had to restart it, and I just finished it a few weeks ago. But for the past 2 months, I've been doing 2-3 months. I've been doing 11 step, and the last month I've been doing a 10 step every night with my sponsor.
Nice.
Right on. I just have this picture of you getting back from Italy, going to your sponsor. No, serious, somebody stole it.
Yeah, dude,
I got a note from my mom.
It was bad. Dude, I almost relapsed over that, really. I was in Italy, and I called my sponsor after it happened, a couple hours after it happened, and I was like, dude, fuck this. I'm going to go get drunk. I'm going to try to meet some Italian ladies, you know what I mean? Right. I'm done, bro. When I get back, we'll see if I can stay sober, but I'm getting fucked up the rest of this trip, you know? And...
Isn't it interesting how just something like that?
How quick
we can just turn on a dime, man, on a dime.
Catastrophic. It was one day, and it was like I had some triggers, like knowing I was in Europe. The only time I've ever drank legally was in Europe. The last time I went, and so I was thinking like, oh man, dude, like I can talk to so many hot girls. Like if I just get a little buzz, it'll be good. And like I was fighting that the whole time until that day when that happened. Like I was like, dude, I'm done. Like, I give up. I'm going back. And, I was expecting my sponsor to be like, hey, man, just, think about it. Don't make any rash decisions. Don't drink. And, like, he didn't say anything like that. The only thing he said was, what about God? Where does God factor into this? You didn't mention one thing about God. And it took me back. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I was not expecting that. And, like, it's a good point, I was like, oh, damn.
That's a good sponsor right there.
Yeah, so I just, like, I paused for a minute, and because I was just shocked. I was, like, not expecting that. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I didn't think of that. And he's like, that's your problem. And I was like, well, fuck, okay. So I talked to him for probably, like, another 20 minutes, and then he just, basically he told me, like, pray about it, man. Like, this is God's way of testing your faith, because the last couple months, after my 3rd step, I had about 4 months when I did my 3rd step. And after that, like, everything started getting better because I was giving it over to God.
Yeah.
And so he's telling me, you've been talking about how good your spirituality is going. This is God's asking you, are you serious about it? Or are you just doing this to, make people like you more, or make people think more highly of you? And I was like, fuck, dude. Like, I never thought of that.
That's a great sponsor.
And so after that, that was like... After that, I became, like, that's when I started praying every day. That's when I prayed in the morning every day, but that's when I really, like, devoted time to it, not just a quick 5-minute prayer in the morning. Like, it was prayer and meditation, that's when I was able to add the meditation to it and just be able to listen to what God wants me to do, you know?
That's the key right there,
Yeah.
is listening.
Yeah.
You know how I talk about that, sitting in a room by yourself.
Yeah,
Right?
and it's hard.
It's
hard.
hard. Oh man, shutting everything off and
it's
just
hard.
sitting there and just listening for that still soft voice of God's, because He is going to talk to you, and you know, and it's hard to discern sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it Him? Is it something else? Is it something else coming into my head? But the more you do it,
Yeah.
man, it's just
like the addiction. Like before this sobriety, I couldn't tell the difference between my addictive thoughts and what my real
Sure.
thoughts were.
Sure.
You know, I thought it, so it must be me. It must be what I want. It must be what I should do. And it took me like a lot of practice in this last sobriety to like really build that way to see between it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like is this really what I want? Is this really what I should be doing, or is it what my addiction wants me to do to go back to what I used to be doing? And like now it's even harder to, you know, what's me, what's God, and what's my addiction, you know? Because, you know, addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It's going to try to sound like God. It's going to try to sound like you.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's still times right now where I think I'm doing the right thing, and then turns out like I'm just following my own will again.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
I try to work on the meditation part, and I can only do like 5 or 10 minutes at a time, you know? Like,
hey, that's 5
it's
or
hard.
10 minutes
That's-
more.
that absolutely
it's difficult
is.
for me to just sit and not do anything, not play music, not, you know, watch a movie, not, you know, I am a very stimulated person.
Right.
I like being stimulated. So like
Same.
it's very difficult, but the more I do it, the better I feel.
Well, I'll
overall.
tell you what, as you get older, guys, that peace and quiet's pretty nice. I got to tell you, you know. But no, I'm still the same way. I mean, I got to be doing something.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, but I haven't mastered anything, but I have gotten so much better at just being able to sit without a TV on, without looking at my phone, without worrying about anything for at least 30 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just
Yeah,
it's
30
just
minutes is a
important for all
long
of us.
time.
Yeah, I'm trying, man. I need to figure out if there's a TV-aholic or something. You know,
Yeah.
I was laid up with back issues this last weekend. The binge watching, here it comes.
Oh,
you know?
yeah?
Because I was a binger with everything, and sometimes
Yeah,
that
sure.
bothers me. I'm like, I'm not gonna watch that movie. It's 2 hours long, and then I watch 5 30-minute episodes. So
Right.
you know, it's like, where was the
Right.
logic in this stuff?
I turned
Yeah.
on Band of Brothers again this weekend. I mean, I go watch 9 episodes of that one right in a row. Yeah.
So it's for me though. That's the way I analyze. Wow, I still like you. I still have some of these behaviors. How do
Yeah.
I change up these behaviors? How do I mix this up? You know, I've had to, like social media. I set a limit. Like people, you know, if I post something personally now, they're amazed. It's like, no, all my time that I allot myself in my day is towards work. So.
Right.
I don't know what to tell you. Sorry, I didn't like your photo of you with your
Yeah.
kids. You know, it's I
Yeah.
didn't realize I was the gatekeeper of your joy with this event.
Yeah.
So it's you know, kind of learning to manage those things, and again, you know, taking a look at self, like you said. Is this me? Is this God? Or is this my addiction?
Right.
And for me, I guess the best thing I can do is, am I doing the next right thing?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
You know, did I cause any harm with this? You know, some things it's up for debate. You know, there's the I could have done or I shoulda, and we could shoulda our way through life. You know, but it's a challenge. It's a daily challenge. You know,
Yeah.
This sobriety thing.
Yeah, it is.
And by the way, it can be a daily challenge for those of us that have long-term sobriety too. You know, it's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
It's always a work in progress. I mean, I had to deal with a couple of things in the past couple of days where, look, my sobriety's never in jeopardy. You know, and I can actually say that now. It's not over something that's out of my control. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, I was involved in a couple little things that my mind went off in other directions, and angrily, just because of just some circumstances that were going on. And and afterwards I really had to sit back and suck it up and make an amend here or there, even though I didn't think it was my fault. It was the way that the situation happened. It was the way that I responded to it that I normally don't respond anymore. But this time I just kind of lost it.
Sure.
But I had to go back and just say, hey man, I'm sorry for that.
So was it just the questioning of getting at, like you said, wasn't my fault, but ditching the victim mentality to the what part did I play in this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is hard. It's hard for I don't care if you're an addict or not.
Yeah, that's hard in general.
Cutting the victim mentality is tough. Well, this to me, that to me, it's like, what part did you have in it?
Yeah, you kind of justify it. You're like, well, you did that, so it's okay that I did this.
Right.
And that's one of my big character defects is that even sober, like, I want to play victim a little bit and justify the things I'm doing.
Sure. But I also, I hope this makes sense, because I've learned this over the years as well. There's a time and a place in circumstances where you need to stand up for yourself.
Of course, yeah.
Absolutely. And you may have to get mad at somebody, right? And it's okay to do that. But again, it all depends on how it's done. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's and that can be a word thing. You can get kind of upset with somebody and talk to them and raise your voice, but the minute you say the word fuck, it takes it to a different level, right? You keep that word out of it, and
it just seems stern,
Right, and that's okay to do. So the language part of getting upset, I think, is comes into play more than we realize.
Because we can snowball it for ourselves. We can definitely make it more than what it is.
Oh, of course.
I've gotten to the point now that if I become silent and non-respondent, that's when you need to worry. I have gotten to that point because I will have, because I know what my triggers are. I know why I relapse. That is my boundary. You hit the boundary, I am going to become non-respondent.
Yeah.
And at that point means that I have seen that there's other actions that need to take place. And that could be eliminating that individual from my life altogether.
Right.
If that's an option.
Right.
Right. Some circumstances where it's not yet an option. But it will be.
Yeah.
It will be. And that's just how life flows and how we have to work this thing.
Yeah. See, and with me, there's nothing silent. I mean, I'm just over the top.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that too. Like sometimes I wig out, but like you said, when I'm really upset, I just shut down. Just whatever.
Yeah.
I don't like being pushed to that point of anger anymore because if I get angry, it's very evident, not a person that'll raise his voice, say fuck you, and then calms down. It bothers me to get that angry, and I'm just not going to give that over to anyone.
Right.
Because I make pretty stupid
decisions,
word decisions and I can have a pretty mean tongue, and I just don't want to go back to that place.
Yeah,
because I hurt myself. It's not about the other individual per se. It's about me. I don't like spewing that hurtful stuff.
Yeah, there's one person in AA that she's known my mom for years, and multiple times when I would come in to get sober, she'd always talk to me. She told me one time I called her and I was like, dude, I want to just say fuck you to this person. Like, I just want to go off on them. And she's like, you know what helps me is thinking every time before I react, I think about, am I going to have to make an amends for this?
Right.
And I was like, damn. So if I think about that, I don't proceed on those actions because I don't want to apologize later. Right. That's worse than getting mad, I don't want to apologize. Fuck that, And it's sometimes like part of recovery is using your character defects to your advantage,
Yeah.
Like my pride is not going to let me apologize. So instead of flipping out on someone, I'm going to let my pride stuff it down a little and let it out in a different, more healthy way so that I don't have to apologize later, you know? And it's just finding those different ways.
Apologies are just, they can be tough. And so I got to tell this one story.
Okay.
I got to say it. So I'm in 6th grade. 6th grade, right? This was one of the most key things in my life. I'm not joking. So a buddy of mine and I were screwing around after class, after school, right in front of the classroom. And my teacher's name was Mrs. Tate. She was fine. Okay, I got to tell you, she was fine. But we're out there yelling, and she calls me into the room, right? Because I said something and my buddy didn't, so I was all pissed off at her. So I actually told her to go F herself. I really didn't even know what the word meant, okay, way back when. So I'll shorten the story. So I get home. Of course, I walk in. My mom already got the phone call from the teacher. You know, in those days, you go to your bedroom, wait for your father to come home. Right. So I go into my bedroom, and I always close my door and fake like I was asleep, so maybe that would stop him from coming through the door, right? No, not at all. The old man just busts right through the door. He looks at me, and he goes, "Bring me the telephone book." And I'm going, oh, shit, the man's going to hit me with a telephone book, all right? And so I get the telephone book, I bring it to him, and he's sitting there, and he's going through the pages. And in those days, I mean, everybody was in the telephone book, right? So he closes the telephone book, he goes, "Get in the car." I'm going, shit, what is he going to do? He's going to kill me and bury me somewhere? So we get in the car, we drive, we pull up to this apartment complex, and he says, "This is her apartment number. Go apologize." He pulled right in front of my teacher's house and made my ass get out, walk up, knock on her door, and apologize to her face. And I did. And I'm here to tell you, I'd have rather been hit with the telephone book, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But what a lesson.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, seriously, what a lesson for the old man to teach you right there. That you know what, you didn't deserve to get spanked, because my dad didn't hit me with a fist. I mean, you know, but you didn't deserve anything else but that.
Yeah.
So you better, because words mean things. Mm-hmm. You know. And I didn't know it. She was pregnant at the time. There was a lot of other stuff going on, right? And I'll tell you what, man. I mean, it was a real important lesson. Yeah. But you're right. Making those amends, that's tough. You know, and it doesn't matter where you're at in your recovery, whether you've got a year or 20 years or 40 years. We still have to make those amends when it's necessary. Mm-hmm. Well, it's just important.
It's that acknowledgement of you know, living with rigorous honesty is tough, because in those moments the person we have to be the most honest with is ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this really sucks. And you know, for the addict brain, we go to all kinds of different places. You know, what did I do? You know, was that me and my disease? What, you know, the whole process just sits and plays out, and it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing regardless of you're sober, never had an addiction, to acknowledge self, that like, I'm the one that messed up. Yeah. I need to make it regardless of what the other person did.
Right.
And it can be harsh too, that I don't know if you went through this. I went through it, was cool, thanks, but no thanks to the apologies. And it's like, okay, I have to accept that I did what I felt was the right thing to do. They didn't accept it. That's okay.
Right.
Well, luckily I haven't done the 9th step yet, so I haven't formally made any amends, which was good so far.
Well, I'll tell you, when I did, I mean, and I went down the list, and there were some people that didn't accept it.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's going to be quite a few people that don't accept mine.
And I had to learn to say it was okay.
Yeah.
You know, it was actually okay for them not to accept it.
Yeah.
And then I just never saw them again.
Yeah, there's a lot of people I don't want to make amends to either, because that what I said is like, they did something wrong to me too, so I feel that I was justified in doing what I did, you know. And it's I've talked to my sponsor about it a lot, and that you know, it's about clearing your side of the street.
Yeah.
Not, you know, who's right or wrong. It's
Right.
just no matter what they did, they could have done something much worse, but you still did something that was wrong, and you apologize for your part. And, you know, if you're lucky, they're going to be the type of person to apologize for their part as well.
Exactly. But you never put yourself or that other person in a situation where it's going to do harm to either one of you, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there
might be some people that you don't have to apologize
There's
to.
a lot of people I don't have to. Yeah.
Right?
I talked to my
'Cause it's gonna
sponsor.
turn
That
into
was
a
one
fight
of the
somewhere.
That was one of the first things I told him. I was like, dude, there's people who will, like, if I go and tell them what I did, they're gonna shoot me in the face. Like,
Yeah.
That's as simple as that. Like, I'm not doing it. And he's like, no, like, you don't have to do that. That's not what the Step 9's
Right.
about. And I was like, oh, thank God, because I was not going to stay sober if that was the case.
But surprisingly enough, again, this is just because of time, because I've had the time under my belt, right? There have been situations in my life where I didn't make that amend to that person at that time, but 10 years later, 20 years later, you know, these people have come back into my life, and it's worked out perfect.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that don't come back, then I figure I don't need them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life has an odd way of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Really odd
Yep.
way. We, you know, for people that we want to dictate how everything goes and control how everything goes, there's a real mystery to this whole thing that'll show up that you just never expect, and it gives you odd lessons and odd gifts to deal with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you're going to have to deal with it. The avoidance thing does not work, because life has a way and our brain has a way to gravitate towards the things we have to heal and grow from.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't confront it, that shit's going to continue to whap you upside the head forever.
Especially in the places we live, especially here in Fresno
Yeah.
and the Valley. I mean, man, there are things that I had forgotten about from 30 years ago that have come full circle. You know, and that wouldn't happen if you lived in L.A. or New York or, you know, I mean, it might, but just not as normal as it does around here. Yeah, small community.
I mean, Fresno's not super small, but the community is pretty small.
Community small. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Weird how that works.
Isn't it?
Weird how that works.
Yeah.
What else you got, Mr. Anderson?
Well, you know, Julian, first of all, I'm proud of you and what you're doing.
Thank you.
This is amazing stuff. I'm proud of Jason too. I mean, both you guys are doing extremely well. I like where you're at. I like everything that you're doing. You've done this the correct way. Now just don't screw it up, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm kidding.
It means a lot coming from you that you tell me you're
it-
proud of me, because you were the only person I felt safe reaching out to when I needed help.
Well, thank you, and I'm honored to even hear that. You know, because look, if we need to help each other during this thing, and there's so many other people out there, you know, that are still suffering from this, and if we can say one thing that's going to help somebody, you know, get through this or get into treatment or, you know, just start the process. I mean, that's what this whole thing's about.
Yeah.
You know, any closing thoughts you've got?
Well, I just want to say that how much respect and how pain has such a special place in my heart, because not only did you help me, but more importantly, you helped my parents.
Thank you.
And I think that I don't think my mom would have had the courage to do what she did, casting me out, if it wasn't for her talking to you and being in the groups, you know, with other parents. And you know, I think treatment's great, but like you said earlier, like, plant the seed, send your kid to treatment once, but after that, it's on their terms, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, you really helped my family, not just me.
It means a lot to me, man. Thank you, my friend.
I appreciate you.
Man.
Love you too.
All right, buddy. Thank you. Jason, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
buddy.
it, Jason.
Yeah, buddy.
good times, you know. Who says us in recovery don't have fun?
That's right.
We sure
All
did.
laughs and smiles.
That's exactly right.
We thank you guys for listening. Of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can get the Don't Hide the Scars documentary part 1 up there. And I think that's about it.
You got it, man. Another great episode. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Flindt. Thank you, Jason.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
This podcast contains the views and opinions of hosts and their guests to the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is sharing their unique perspective, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Privacy is of the utmost importance to us. For those wishing anonymity, people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect confidentiality at the request of certain guests. This website or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship. If you find any errors in any of the content of this podcast or blogs, please send a message through the contact page.